ReZero Starting Life in Another World Volume 13 with the most testosterone-filled cover up until this point, with Otto and Garfiel on the cover. As the author rightly put it in the afterword, this is the first cover on the series that only has men in it, as if you recall, even Volume 7 had Theresia behind Wilhelm. I really like this cover. It properly highlights both characters, with Garfiel looking lean, jacked and juicy with a defiant look that's characteristic of him, and Otto being sold as the brave underdog that will not back down without a fight. Besides that, it also showcases a cool scene from the book that immediately leaves the reader interested. Are Garfiel and Otto fighting? I must find out why. My only question is really, why don't they do these types of covers more often, as instead of just the usual character posing in a background that may or may not have anything to do with the story, these types of covers leave the reader more interested not just in the character but on the book that they are actually buying and reading. There have been a couple of suspect covers which I didn't like that much, so I really like Volume 13's cover. It stands out because not only it highlights the characters, but also highlights the point of the story where they're relevant, so I wish they did more of these and I'm looking forward to the next one. Now, for Volume 13, we are now on the second half of Arc 4, so things are heating up, and you know what they say, before you get to the climax of a story, you must first break down the trauma of your characters and make them grow. Actually, I've never heard that before, but that's exactly what happens in this book. This volume can be pretty much summed up as the character exploration and development of Garfiel, Otto, Subaru and Emilia, and the volume centers pretty much around those four characters and how they overcome their struggles. First, let's speak some facts. Otto is the man in this volume, and after being in the sidelines for volume 12, he comes back with a bang. And when I say bang, I mean literally, as he punched Subaru in this volume. And because Subaru is a sucker for pain, and Otto is such a manly man out of a sudden, he also delivered a headbutt and a judo throw. This man can do it all. Truly a manly display for a character that is usually known to be meek. In fact, his usual meekness is why he stands out so much in this volume. Alpha male Otto makes Subaru spill his secrets through sheer violence, then fully believes him on the pure basis that they're friends, and then helps Subaru by fighting what is perhaps the single strongest individual in the sanctuary. Alpha male Otto cannot be stopped. This man is a menace. Alpha male Otto flexes so much in this volume that by the end even Garfiel respects him despite the huge difference in power. The fight scene between Garfiel and Otto is simply amazing. You have the resourceful, sneaky underdog versus the brute force of nature. This type of fight dynamic always tingles me in all the right spots, so I was very excited when reading this for the first time, and I was still hyped now when rereading it. From the seemingly useless petty magic tricks to project sound, to then Garfiel realizing that Otto had stolen from him, to Otto slowing down Garfiel through traps and the sheer power of his blessing utilized to his full potential like we have never seen before, to the final big bang Al Donna that's the climax of their fight, this fight was simply amazing. As we know, despite his valiant efforts, Otto still lost, but he was crucial in slowing down Garfiel, and he does all of these amazing feats in this volume, and the main question is why? Subaru saved Otto's life, and Otto has passionately stated that they're friends, but if you think about the actual timeline, Otto and Subaru haven't known each other for that long, so why go through so much effort? We get some answers to this in Otto's backstory in a chapter named after himself, as has become tradition in ReZero. And with that context, Otto later admits in a monologue that he sees his past self in Subaru, so Otto is helping Subaru not only because they're friends, but also because he's trying to help his past self and give some sort of closure to his pain growing up. In ReZero, unlike other series, nobody really helps the main character just because he's the main character. There's usually always a logical reason, and this context really gives more substance to Otto's actions and makes him feel more human. He has a very concrete reason that is both altruistic and selfish to help Subaru. Now, there's something about Otto's backstory that I just have to get off my chest. This is perhaps the third time that I read Otto's backstory, and it always baffles me how no one really values Otto's blessing. I mean, it makes sense for people, especially children, to be disgusted at Otto for being able to talk with insects, but the fact that no one realized how much potential he had is just surprising. Even in the world of ReZero with magical powers of fire and wind and whatever it may be, Otto's blessing is still incredibly useful. For example, Otto could become a world-level animal breeder or a world-level veterinarian in a world where the main means of transportation are still carriages. For more military applications, Otto could also become a great scout or a great spy with access to information no one else has. There's a lot of cool applications to Otto's blessing if you just think about it for like 10 seconds. So how was Otto so shunned? Did the people in his hometown just not have a brain to think? And the same thing applies to Otto himself. Otto was born with this amazing ability he could be exploiting to get easy cash money, and instead he's just going around gambling it all on trying to become a merchant and selling oil. Just why? Anyway, maybe I'm missing something, maybe it isn't as easy as it seems. After all, Otto does reveal in this volume that his ability has some sort of limit, but still, this whole backstory always seemed super bizarre to me, doesn't make much sense. Speaking of Otto, let's go to Subaru. Subaru starts out this volume with the continuation of the witches' tea party from the previous volume, and we get to this strange situation where these weird witches are trying to somehow help Subaru, each in their own witch-like way, which provides us with some interesting and funny interactions. For example, Typhon doesn't really care if Subaru disappears as long as it's his own choice, so she interprets that as what's being best for him since it's his will, while Daphne protects Subaru, but not really because she's interested in him per se, but because she's curious as to how he will deal with Yosagi as he promised. So as you can see, these witches are doing what they think is best for Subaru, but in their own witch-like thought process, which is very weird. And you know, for some reason Subaru managed to get these walking calamities on his side and to care for him, so now Subaru's talents include suing, not reading the room, and being a witch pickup artist. Not bad for our main character. The most shocking of all is of course Satella. The story constantly reminds us how evil Satella is and how everybody fears her, and here she is telling Subaru to love himself more. From main villain to therapist, now that's a character progression. We learn in this volume that Satella has some sort of personality disorder, so is this the nice Satella and the one that crushes people's hearts and gulps them into never-ending darkness? Is that the bad one? I guess we'll find out one day. At the end of this chapter, we get another shocking reveal. Satella has been quite persistent that she wants Subaru to love her, but apparently she wants something a little bit different. And someday you will come to kill me, yes? What? I love this whole mystery and teasing around Satella, if I'm being honest. I know that this is likely something that will only be revealed in the final arcs, but still, I'm really looking forward to reading it. It really leaves me curious to read more. If Arc 3 did a great job leaving me curious about Al, then Arc 4 does a great job leaving me curious about Satella. Back to Subaru, our main character makes the decision to not recklessly throw his life away, refusing Echidna's help. He not only wants to protect those that he loves, but he also wants to preserve himself. This is a big contrast to his martyr-like attitude in volume 12, and Echidna even calls this greed. We'll see how it works out for him, but I think this is a much healthier and saner attitude for Subaru to have than the edgy martyr route which didn't really fit him in the first place. In the middle of all of this, the witches let slip that Subaru is a sage candidate, and that's pretty cool, because up until this point Subaru has proven to be, besides Return by Death obviously, completely average, with no inherent advantages just because he's from another world, and yet now he is revealed to have this sort of unique power, but the big question is, what does being a sage candidate mean? At the end of the book, we see that Subaru can now use a very limited version of Petaleuce's unseen hands. So does being a sage candidate mean that you can use the witch factors, or is it something else entirely? Much like the Satella stuff, they just really tease us and don't explain much, but still I think it's very interesting for Subaru to have the potential to become a main player in the story, besides just the dude with impeccable timing, as Rum likes to call him. The now determined Subaru, with the help of Otto, decides to challenge Roswaal to a bet in a chapter name with the same name as the banger song from Mitten Droid, that's the soundtrack in the anime, Straight Bet. I love how they play with Roswaal's pride and arrogance in this. Roswaal doesn't really need to take any bet with Subaru. The biggest power move that Roswaal can do is simply do nothing until Subaru becomes the monster that he wants him to. Roswaal holds all the cards, and yet he takes this bet simply because he's unable to even conceive that he will lose. I love Roswaal's relationship with Subaru in this book. It reminds me of the Joker and Batman in The Dark Knight for those who have seen it. At one point, Subaru implies that Roswaal hates him, to which Roswaal replies like this: "Hate you? It is impossible for me to hate you. You are my hope. If I harbor the emotion one might call expectation anywhere in this world, it is with you and Rum and none others. I trust you from the bottom of my heart." No matter how much suffering Roswaal puts Subaru through, he looks at it as necessary, and he does this because he actually has expectations for Subaru. He doesn't want Subaru gone, he looks at him as a trusted ally. Subaru evolves a lot in Volume 13. He discards his toxic mindset, he learns to trust and rely on his friends like Otto, he finally confronts Roswaal, but most importantly, Subaru becomes a man. Oh yes, Subaru does the lewdest, most erotic thing one can do. I don't even know if I can say such obscenity on YouTube. Subaru kisses Emilia. Nani? We don't have an oblivious, ineffectual main character that does nothing to pursue his romantic interests? I am not used to reading this type of material. I thought you were supposed to ignore love for more than 1,000 chapters like in Hajimeru Isekai. The recipient of this lovely kiss is of course Emilia, who has some major breakthroughs in this volume, and one can argue it was about time. Emilia's position as main heroine has been kind of awkward honestly, and if it wasn't for Ram being deleted from existence, her position would be in grave danger. Let's think about this for a second. Emilia, in Arc 2, she didn't really do much of the fighting, she just provided emotional support I guess, but the actual cool fighting scenes were done by Ram and Subaru. In Arc 3 she was mostly away, she didn't really do much in the final loop, besides just being there and being saved I guess. And in Arc 4 she has been also pretty much in the background, just suffering from her past and being able to advance much of anything in the trial. I don't dislike Emilia as a character, however I must question the decision of making your main heroine mostly just a damsel in distress for the first 12 books of your story. Even worse, while highlighting another female character who is also a romantic interest for our main character. I'm a simple guy, I don't really do shippings or anything of the sort, I don't really care who ends up with who as long as the story is good and I'm entertained, but it's very easy to see why so many people either hate Emilia or are simply bored of her by the time the story gets to this point. She's a character that really takes a while to get going. Thankfully, Volume 13 explains a lot of things that help demystify Emilia, namely her physical, mental and real ages are all disconnected. This explains why she uses so many antiquated expressions, while at the same time she seems so naive and innocent. Mentally, as in years she has been conscious on this world, she's 14 years old. If anything, she's mature for 14 years old. I mean, I wouldn't put a 14-year-old as a candidate to rule a country, but maybe that's just me. Another mystery is why the trial affected her so much. If you remember the Kiss of Death back in Volume 12, she forced herself to take the trial over and over again, and the psychological damage was so severe that she snapped. I don't want to diminish past trauma in any way, but how shocking can your past really be? I mean, it can be traumatic to relive it, but everything you see in your trial are from your own memories, so it really shouldn't surprise you. Emilia always seemed to be overreacting, and now we know that she was in fact very surprised as her past memories were being suppressed due to her contract with Puck. Everything makes total sense now. She was being confronted with memories that she couldn't recall and was having major cognitive dissonance. Up until this point, Emilia relied on Puck as if he was her own father figure, and now he's gone. On one hand, I think we lost a very interesting secondary character, and I hope more will be done with him in the future. On the other hand, I think this is the perfect opportunity for Emilia to grow, to become independent and to develop past the damsel in distress that keeps relying on everyone. I also really like the subtle parallel they do between Emilia and Subaru. Whereas Subaru has trouble believing that Otto will believe his story, Emilia immediately tells everything to Subaru because she knows he will believe her. This really tells a lot about both characters and their outlooks towards their relationships. Finally, Subaru finds Emilia alone in the tomb and they have a very childish lover's quarrel. And listen, we've all fought with our loved ones, but the dialogue here is very typical of a 14-year-old. Emilia is mentally 14, and Subaru, from his past life, we know that he's not very mature either and probably has no experience with these types of things. So the dialogue ends up being a little bit childish and a little bit ridiculous, but I think it's cute and it fits both characters. And after a charming line from our playboy Subaru, "If you don't like it, dodge," we finally get the kiss between the two of them. This is a very juvenile love, but I think it's cute for now, and I hope it actually grows into something worthwhile reading, because I have to admit, I was laughing the whole time because this is so very, innocent. I can't quite explain it. Also, I think it's hilarious that these two dorks' first kiss was inside of a tomb, Echidna's tomb, and you know when Emilia takes the trial, Echidna has access to her memories, so Echidna knows that Emilia kissed Subaru after Subaru rejected her, and that has got to sting. At the end of the book, as Emilia takes the trial, Echidna is being excessively mean towards her. "You are a loose woman, shameless and immoral. Damn, Echidna, why are you cooking her like that? Leave the girl alone, she had a family." We don't know how good of a kisser Subaru was, but we know that Emilia is motivated as she replies to these insults by doing the goofy Subaru finger-pointing pose and introducing herself, so that's kinda cute. Finally, for our puss without boots, Garfiel, this volume is a wild ride. Garfiel gets outsmarted by Otto and then fights Otto and has way more trouble than he should, then he fights Rum, then he fights Subaru and takes on the best uppercut in the entire series, he still stands up and then he gets rammed by Patarash. Then, after his defeat in this extreme handicap match, he goes into the trial and faces his own past, and he's also 14 apparently. Why is everybody 14 in this book? Stop it, although that does explain a lot of Garfiel's actions. When it comes to Garfiel, it's interesting to see how he is when he's calm and rational to how different he can be when he goes berserk and just blanks out, when he relies on his blood, as Subaru puts it. Garfiel in this volume we discover is not actually a bad dude, he's a good boy with a good heart, he's just misguided and lashing out at the world because of his own past trauma. Also, the fact that after all of this, Garfiel calls Subaru by General is just hilarious. Volume 13 was fun. I like that they focused mostly around characters dealing with their past and character development. I also like that they did a lot of plot exposition through dialogue, which feels like natural conversations for these characters to have. I also like that they finally explained some of the weird behaviors of Garfiel and Emilia, and now we can look back at things and make more sense of them. We can look at their actions through another lens. However, besides Otto's backstory, which I've already addressed, I do have a main criticism for Volume 13. The whole Garfiel subplot relies too much on the reader's suspension of disbelief, and I think could have been much better handled. If the end goal was to get Garfiel on the crew's side and for Garfiel to overcome his past, I can't help but think there were much better, safer, non-violent solutions to this. It feels a bit like forced conflict. Sure, it's a big epic hero moment for Otto to confront Garfiel, but I can't help but think reading this, wasn't there a better way? Also, why didn't they get Shima to help with Garfiel, for example? At some point Otto says something like, "We chose to keep her out of this," but why? It doesn't make much sense to me. It feels like the Garfiel fight was forced in order for this book to have some sort of main conflict, and if you truly think about it from a story perspective, it doesn't really hold up. Especially because Garfiel is the most volatile, unpredictable character in the Sanctuary that could at any point go berserk with his beast blood and ruin this loop, forcing Subaru to reset, which is the one thing he said to Roswaal he would not do in this bet. Also, and this has nothing to do with the story, but Volume 13 has some translation errors, which, while they aren't numerous, they really stand out as things that shouldn't happen in an official translation. Out of all the Yen Press translations which I've read, this one is the one with the most errors. I don't know if I have an older copy of the book and if newer copies have this fixed, but really this one was the worst up until now. Overall, I still enjoyed this volume, I just think it has some flaws and the writing wasn't as good as Volume 12's, for example. If I had to choose an MVP for Volume 13, this time it's obvious, it has got to be Otto. I still have complaints about his backstory, but my man was a true friend and a brave hero in this volume. Otto is my MVP for Volume 13. This was all for me today, folks. I'm hoping that this year I can catch up to the official releases, so until then be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the next review. Bye bye.